A crowded flight. A white passenger. Carolyn refuses to sit next to Elijah, a black teen. She gags. She sprays sanitizer. She demands a new seat. The flight attendant says no. The cabin groans as the pilot announces another delay, holding the plane for one VIP passenger. Finally, a tall, powerful man walks onto the plane. He stops at the row. The entire cabin freezes. He looks at the woman, then at the boy, and his voice cuts through the silence. Elijah. What's going on? The woman had no idea who she had just insulted, or how desperately she would need him. The air in Gate 77B at LAX was thick with the curdled misery of a 4-hour delay. It was a volatile mix of stale Cinnabon jet fuel and collective human frustration. Flight to Chicago O'Hare was now a red delayed on the board, a beacon of hopelessness for the 300 souls trapped in the terminal. In the midst of this chaos sat Elijah Thorne. At 16, Elijah carried himself with a quiet poise that seemed unnatural for his age. He was dressed in a simple, dark grey hoodie jeans and clean sneakers, but the case he protected with his left hand was anything but simple. It was a black carbon fiber violin case, scarred with stickers from various music camps, Interlochen Aspen Tanglewood. Inside it rested his future, or at least the next critical piece of it. He was flying alone to audition for the prestigious Midwest Young Artists Conservatory. He was nervous, but the nerves were a familiar humming thrum beneath his skin, a partner to the music. He checked his phone. A text from his dad. Landed at LAX. Grabbed my bag. I will see you on the plane. Love you, son. Break a leg. Elijah smiled, texting back. See you, Dad. Flight's delayed again, but they're finally lining us up. He stood, stretching his long legs, and blended into the restless herd moving toward the boarding lane. A few spots ahead of him, a woman was having a very loud, very one-sided conversation on her phone. I told you, Richard, it's a disaster. She snapped, her voice a sharp, expensive blade. This was Carolyn Vance. She was in her mid-50s, poured into a cream-colored St. John knit suit that probably cost more than Elijah's violin. Her blonde hair was a helmet of precise, unmovable layers. Her face beneath a sheen of expensive foundation was a mask of pure, undiluted stress. No, I will not calm down, she hissed into her phone. This entire trip, my meeting is at 9 a.m. 9. And I'm stuck here with these people. She gestured vaguely at the entire gate, a sweep of her hand that dismissed everyone. Richard, my God, just listen. The specialist in Chicago is our last hope. If I miss this consultation, if I don't get him to take your case, just rest. I'll handle it. She clicked off the phone, letting out a sharp, performative sigh. She looked at the gate agent, then at the line, as if daring someone to challenge her. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and for a fleeting dismissive second, they passed over Elijah. He was just part of the scenery, part of the problem. The gate agent, a weary woman named Linda, crackled the microphone. We are now boarding Zone 3. Please have your boarding passes ready. Zone 3 only. Carolyn Vance, who was clearly holding a Zone 4 pass, simply pushed her way to the front, flashing her ticket with an air of, "You should be lucky I'm flying your tin can." Linda, too tired to fight, simply scanned it and waved her through. Elijah, a Zone 4, waited patiently. He watched the organized chaos, his headphones in, listening to a recording of Itzhak Perlman, playing the Mendelssohn Concerto. He was in his own world, a world of harmony and precision, blissfully unaware of the discord he was about to board. When Zone 4 was finally called, he shuffled forward, gave Linda a polite nod, and walked down the jet bridge. The plane, a Boeing 757, was already hot and cramped. He navigated the narrow aisle, his violin case held protectively in front of him. He found his row 22. 22MA. The window was occupied by a man in his 40s, Bill already deeply engrossed in a spreadsheet on his laptop. He seemed to have mastered the art of making himself as small as possible. 22C. The aisle was Carolyn Vance. She had already claimed her territory. Her large leather purse was on the middle seat, 22B. Her cashmere shawl was draped over the back of it. Her water bottle was in the seat back pocket. She was in effect occupying 2 full seats. Elijah stopped. "Excuse me, ma'am." Carolyn looked up from her Vogue magazine, her eyes cold. "What? I think that's my seat. 22B. Carolyn Vance looked at Elijah. She saw him this time. She took in his dark skin, his hoodie, his locks which were tied back neatly. Her upper lip tightened an infinitesimal, barely perceptible sneer. She sighed a long, theatrical exhalation. Oh, for heaven's sake. She didn't move. She just stared at him. Elijah, raised to be polite, tried again. "Ma'am, I'm 22B. Could I—" "Fine," she snapped. She didn't apologize. She didn't move her purse. She grabbed her shawl, yanking it away as if Elijah might have contaminated it with his presence. Then she gestured to the purse. "Move it." Elijah, confused, said, "Could you—" "Just move it," she hissed, her voice low and sharp. "I don't want to touch it after you." The implication hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Bill in 22A flinched and sank deeper into his laptop screen. Elijah, his face burning, carefully picked up the heavy leather bag by its strap and handed it to her. She took it from him, as if he were handing her a piece of rotting fish, pinching the strap between her thumb and forefinger. "Thank you," Elijah said quietly, his voice tight. He slid into 22B. It was a tight squeeze. He was a tall kid, all knees and elbows. He carefully maneuvered his violin case, sliding it under the seat in front of him. He was in. He was seated. He tried to make himself small, to shrink. He pulled his hoodie a little tighter. And then Carolyn Vance opened her purse. She pulled out a small, travel-sized bottle of hand sanitizer. With a loud, wet squirt, she doused her hands. She rubbed them together vigorously, the sickly sweet chemical smell of lavender and alcohol flooding the small space. She didn't stop there. She pulled out a travel pack of antibacterial wipes. She ripped one open and began with furious, targeted energy to wipe down the armrest between her and Elijah. She wiped the seatbelt buckle. She wiped the plastic wall of the cabin. She wiped everything. It wasn't a germaphobe clean. It was an exorcism. Elijah felt the blood drain from his face. He was frozen. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. He could feel the eyes of the passengers in row 21. He could feel Bill in 22A pretending not to notice, which was in its own way just as bad. Carolyn finished her ritual. She stuffed the used wipe into the seatback pocket, and then, in the final unmissable act of revulsion, she angled her entire body away from him. She presented Elijah with her sharp, cashmere-covered shoulder, her body a rigid wall of rejection. She pressed herself against the aisle, as far from him as she could get without falling out of her seat. Elijah stared straight ahead, his heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He felt dirty. He felt small. He felt seen in the worst possible way. He wanted to cry. He wanted to rage. He wanted to teleport to Chicago. Instead, He just sat there, a 16-year-old boy, breathing in the smell of lavender-scented hatred, praying for the plane to just move. But the plane wasn't moving. Carolyn Vance, it turned out, was not finished. The minutes ticked by, stretching into an agonizing, silent torture. 10 minutes. 15. The plane's doors were still open, but the finality of the cabin was setting in. Elijah had his headphones on, but no music was playing. He couldn't. He was using them as a shield, a passive-aggressive do not disturb sign. But it wasn't working. He could feel Carolyn's restlessness. It was like a physical vibration. She fidgeted, huffed, and repeatedly checked her gold-plated iPhone. Finally, she couldn't take it. She didn't just want a new seat. She seemed to need it, as if 22B were a source of toxic fumes. She unbuckled her seatbelt with a loud metallic click. "Excuse me," she said, her voice like a stage whisper, meant for the entire cabin. She was talking to Elijah, but her eyes were aimed over his head, looking for a flight attendant. Elijah froze. He slowly pulled one earbud out. "Ma'am, I need to get out," she snapped. "Move! Now!" She wasn't asking to go to the bathroom. She was getting out. "Oh, okay," Elijah stammered, fumbling with his own seatbelt. He quickly unbuckled and stood up, moving as far into the aisle as he could to let her pass. The aisle was, of course, clogged with other passengers still boarding, so he was stuck half in, half out, his violin case, getting jostled by a passing suitcase. Carolyn didn't just slide past him. She launched herself into the aisle, pushing past Elijah without a thank you or excuse me. She staggered into the man behind her, who grunted. "Ma'am, please," the man said, annoyed. "I need a flight attendant," Carolyn announced, her voice rising in pitch, cutting through the cabin e-boarding announcements. Right now, a flight attendant, a woman in her late 40s with a name tag that read Susan, and a smile that was 90% professional training and 10% sheer exhaustion, appeared from the galley. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" Susan asked, her voice, a practiced, soothing monotone. "Yes, there is a huge problem," Carolyn said, pointing directly at Elijah, who was still standing awkwardly in the aisle. "I cannot sit there." The accusation hung in the air. "Sit there," Susan repeated, confused. "Ma'am, that is your assigned seat, 22C. "I mean, I cannot sit next to him," Carolyn clarified, her voice dropping but with a new, sharper edge of venom. It's not sanitary." Susan's practiced smile flickered. It died completely. I beg your pardon." Elijah felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. He could feel dozens of eyes on him. The man in 22A Bill was now staring, his laptop forgotten. The couple in 21. The man in 23. Everyone was watching. Just look at him," Carolyn said, gesturing with a manicured hand. I don't feel safe. And the smell. He smells like..." She couldn't find the word, so she just wrinkled her nose in disgust. Elijah was clean. He had showered that morning. He was wearing a fresh-out-of-the-dryer hoodie. The only smell was the faint, resinous scent of his violin's rosin, a smell he associated with hard work and music. But Carolyn's accusation was clear. "Ma'am," Susan said, and her voice was no longer soothing. It was steel. "This is a full flight. The only empty seats are in business class, and they are reserved. You must return to your assigned seat." "No." Carolyn's voice was now a near shriek, drawing attention from the front of the cabin. "You don't understand. I paid for my ticket. I will not be subjected to this. He's probably..." He's probably diseased. It was the final straw. A man in the row behind a large man in a bear's sweatshirt spoke up. "Oh, come on, lady. The kid hasn't done anything. Sit down and shut up." "How dare you?" Carolyn whirled on him. "No, how dare you?" Susan, the flight attendant, cut in, her voice now loud and authoritative. "Ma'am, you are causing a disturbance. You have two choices. You can return to seat 22C immediately. You can be escorted off this aircraft." The words "escorted off" were a bucket of ice water. Carolyn's face went pale, then mottled with red. She looked at Susan's badge. "I will have your job for this, Susan. I will be reporting you to the FAA, to the airline, to everyone." "That is your right, ma'am," Susan said, not blinking. "Now please, take your seat. We are already delayed." Carolyn was shaking with rage. She was trapped. She looked back at 22B, where Elijah was still standing, his face a mask of humiliation. He looked like a deer in the headlights, caught and frozen. "Fine," Carolyn spat. The word was a curse. She jabbed a finger at Elijah. "You move!" Elijah. His hands, shaking quickly, sat back down in 22B. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. Carolyn Vance sat down in 22C. She didn't just sit. She collapsed into the seat in a controlled fall, a protest against gravity itself. She snapped her seatbelt into place with such violence it was a small explosion. And then she did something that cemented the horror. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small white N95 face mask. With a sharp, angry pull of the elastic bands, she strapped it to her face. It wasn't for germs. It was for him. Elijah turned his head, pressing his face against the synthetic fabric of the seat in front of him. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, the 16-year-old prodigy, the kid who could play Bach in his sleep, had to fight back tears. He willed himself to be made of stone. Susan, the flight attendant, watched for a second longer, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity for Elijah and utter contempt for Carolyn. She gave a sharp nod. "We will be closing the cabin doors shortly." As she walked away, the pilot's voice came over the PA system. The cabin, already on edge, went silent. Folks, this is Captain Miller up in the cockpit. First, I want to apologize for this unprecedented delay. We had a series of mechanical checks, and we've been cleared for a while. But I'm afraid we have one more slight hold." A collective groan, loud and angry, swept the plane. Carolyn ripped her mask down. "You have got to be kidding me!" she yelled to no one and everyone. The pilot continued, his voice tight. "We are being held at the gate for one final passenger. Apparently he is a medical VIP, and the airline is holding the flight for him. They assure me he is on his way down the jet bridge now. We'll have the door closed in 2 minutes. We apologize for the inconvenience." Carolyn was apoplectic. VIP. A VIP. We've been sitting in this terminal for 4 hours, and they're holding the plane for one person. This is the most incompetent, ridiculous. Elijah, meanwhile, had felt a different kind of jolt. Landed at LAX, grabbed my bag. "I will see you on the plane." His dad's text. His father, who was flying to the same Chicago conference. His father, who had been rerouted through LA last minute. Elijah's heart, which had been a cold stone in his stomach, suddenly started to pound. He slowly sat up, a strange, impossible hope dawning on his face. He looked down the aisle toward the front of the plane. The cabin door was still open. The tension on Flight 1109 had become a living thing. It was a dragon in the aisle, breathing smoke and fire. Every passenger was angry. Angry about the delay, angry about Carolyn's scene, and now incandescently angry that they were all being held for one VIP. "Unbelievable," Carolyn muttered, loud enough for the back row to hear. She was on her phone again, firing off a text, presumably to her long-suffering husband, Richard. "This airline is a complete joke. They'll let anyone on." She glanced at Elijah. "And hold the plane for some C-list celebrity. Watch, it'll be some rapper." Elijah ignored her. His entire focus was now on the open door at the front of the cabin. He was leaning forward, his head just peeking into the aisle. "Sit up," Carolyn snapped, jabbing him with her elbow. "You're in my space." Elijah recoiled, pulling back into his seat, but his eyes never left the front. "Susan, close the door," a man shouted from the back. "Let's go." "Sir, the pilot just said we are waiting for one more," Susan called back, her patience worn down to a single fraying thread. And then he appeared. First it was just a silhouette in the bright, open doorway. A tall man. He paused, letting his eyes adjust to the dim cabin light. He was carrying a simple leather weekender bag and a black laptop case. He wasn't in a flashy suit. He was wearing dark, tailored travel slacks, a crisp blue button-down, and a lightweight cashmere sweater draped over his shoulders. He looked powerful, but not in the way Carolyn tried to be. He looked composed. His presence commanded the space. The angry, buzzing cabin suddenly went very, very quiet. The man stepped inside and nodded to the two flight attendants at the front. "My apologies for the delay," he said. His voice was deep calm and carried a natural authority. It was a voice used to being listened to. "They had me at the wrong terminal." "Not a problem, sir," Susan said, her professionalism snapping back into place, her voice suddenly warm. "We're just glad to have you. We can finally get on our way. Your seat is 12A in business." The man smiled, a brief, polite flash of white. "Thank you. But my pass says 23C. I'm afraid I'm back with everyone else." "Oh," Susan said, surprised. "My apologies, sir. 23C it is. Right this way." The man began the slow walk down the aisle. He was in no hurry. He navigated the cramped part with an athlete's grace. As he passed, people looked at him. He had an air of quiet, serious importance. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a rapper. He looked important, like a man who made decisions that mattered. Carolyn Vance watched him. Her eyes narrowed. She was assessing him. His shoes were expensive. His watch, a simple, elegant Patek Philippe, was not. She recognized quality. She sat up a little straighter, a flicker of interest, perhaps even respect in her eyes. This, she seemed to be thinking, was the right kind of person. The man walked past row 19, row 20. He reached row 21. Elijah was now vibrating. He couldn't breathe. The man stopped. He was parallel with row 22, but his destination was 23C, just behind Elijah and Carolyn. He turned slightly, preparing to let a passenger from 23A get into the aisle to let him into his window seat. Wait, no, 23C was an aisle. He was just stopping. He stopped, his eyes scanning the row. He saw Bill in 22A, hunched over his laptop. He saw Carolyn in 22C, staring at him with her masked face and hostile eyes. And then he saw 22B, the entire cabin, all the frustration, all the anger. It all evaporated from the man's face. His expression, which had been neutral and polite, melted. It softened into something warm, something personal. A slow, proud smile spread across his face. He ignored Carolyn completely. He ignored Bill. He looked directly only at the 16-year-old boy, crammed into the middle seat. The entire cabin froze. This was the VIP. This was the man who had held up the plane. And he had stopped not for his seat, but for this row. For this boy. The silence was absolute. It was heavy, and it was terrified. Carolyn, sensing the shift, looked from the man to Elijah and back again. A flicker of something. Not yet fear, just confusion. The man's deep voice cut through the silence. It wasn't loud, but it filled the plane. Elijah. Elijah let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The tears he'd been fighting back welled up, but this time they were from relief. "Hey, Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking. The man, Dr. Marcus Thorne, leaned down past Carolyn's rigid, outraged shoulder. He didn't ask her to move. He simply loomed into her space, a mountain eclipsing her son. He put a large, steady hand on Elijah's shoulder. "What's going on, son?" Marcus asked. His smile was gone. His eyes, now that he was closer, were sharp. He was a man trained to see things others missed. And he missed nothing. He saw the N95 mask on the woman, next to his son. He saw the way Elijah was pressed against the seat, trying to make himself invisible. He saw the residual chemical smell of sanitizer. He saw the tear track on his son's cheek. He looked at Carolyn. Really looked at her. And Carolyn Vance, for the first time in her life, knew what it was to be truly, utterly, and devastatingly assessed. Dr. Marcus Thorne did not raise his voice. He did not cause a scene. He was not by nature a dramatic man. His entire life was a monument to precision, calm, and control. He was a man who held human hearts in his hands. The manufactured drama of a passenger plane was to him laughable. But this was his son. He held his gaze on Carolyn Vance. He didn't speak. He just waited. He had a stillness that was more terrifying than any shout. It was the stillness of an operating theater, the absolute quiet where one mistake means death. Carolyn began to sweat. The St. John knit suit suddenly felt like a wool blanket in a sauna. She could feel the eyes of the man in the Bears sweatshirt. She could feel Susan, the flight attendant who had stopped to watch. She could feel the entire plane watching. Carolyn stammered. Her voice, which had been a weapon, was now a thin, reedy squeak. She pulled the mask down, realizing how it must look. We were just waiting." Marcus Thorne's eyes were like scalpels. They were a cool, intelligent grey, and they moved from the mask in her hand to her face, and then to the space between her and his son. He wouldn't move," she tried a pathetic lie. "I needed to get out." Elijah flinched, but his father's hand on his shoulder was a rock. "Stay still, son," Marcus murmured, not taking his eyes off Carolyn. He turned his head slightly, just enough, to address Bill in 22A. "Sir," Marcus said, his voice pure, quiet command. "What happened here?" Bill looked up, his face pale. He was a simple accountant from Peoria. He had not signed up for this. He looked at Carolyn's furious, pleading face, then at Dr. Thorne's calm, expectant one. Bill swallowed. She was loud. She refused to sit next to him. She said he smelled. Bill looked down, ashamed. She used sanitizer, wiped everything down. Like he was poison. A collective quiet gasp rippled through the nearby rows. The story, now confirmed by a third party, was 100 times uglier. Marcus Thorne closed his eyes for a single, long second. He inhaled. He processed. Then he opened them. He did not look at Carolyn. He looked past her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat. He was speaking to Susan, the flight attendant, who was now standing right beside him. "Yes, sir." Susan was there, her notebook out. "This woman," he said, finally, gesturing with his chin toward Carolyn, "has created a hostile and I believe racially motivated incident against a minor. My minor. I want her removed from this flight." The cabin exploded. "Yes!" yelled the man in the bear's sweatshirt. "Get her off!" shouted someone else. Carolyn's world, which had been built on the solid bedrock of her own entitlement, cracked. It shattered. "No!" she shrieked, the mask falling from her lap. "You can't. I have to be in Chicago. It's an emergency, huh? A medical emergency." This finally made Marcus pause. His head tilted. The word medical was a trigger for him. It was his language. "A medical emergency." He repeated, his voice skeptical but curious. "Yes." Carolyn was desperate now, grabbing at any straw. "My husband, he's at Northwestern. He's dying. He's at the Vance Cardio Institute. I have to get to him. I have a consultation. A specialist. It's our last hope." She was sobbing now, the mask of her composure melting into a ruin of mascara and desperation. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm stressed. I'm so stressed. I didn't mean it. Please." The cabin, which had been a lynch mob a moment before, quieted. This was new. This was complicated. Marcus Thorne studied her. His face was unreadable. He looked at the sniveling, desperate woman. He looked at his son, who was looking at his father with a new, complicated expression. Elijah was learning in that moment the difference between power and strength. Carolyn had power. His father had strength. "Dad," Elijah said, his voice quiet. It's okay. Let's just go." Marcus looked at his son. He saw the exhaustion in his eyes. He saw the hurt, but he also saw the resilience. He had raised a good man. He made a decision. He turned back to Susan. "Flight attendant, I am Dr. Marcus Thorne. This is my son, Elijah Thorne, 22B. I am in 23C. He then looked at Carolyn. Her face was a mess of tears and hope. "You will stay in this seat," he said to her. It was not a request. "You will not speak to my son. You will not look at him. You will not breathe on him. You will angle your body toward the aisle. You will make yourself small." He was using her own words, her own actions against her. He was shrinking her. "Yes," she whispered, nodding, wiping her nose. "Yes, of course. Anything." "We will land in Chicago," Marcus continued, his voice a low, cold promise. "And you and I will have a conversation. But for the next 3 hours, you are a ghost. Do you understand me?" "Yes, thank you. Thank you." Carolyn was weeping with gratitude. Marcus Thorne gave her one last look of unadulterated clinical disgust. Then he turned away. He gave Elijah's shoulder one last firm squeeze. "I'll be right behind you, son. You okay?" Elijah nodded, his chin high. "I am now Dad." Marcus stepped back and slid into his seat. 23C. The flight attendants, with a new, frantic energy, hurried to the front. Susan made an announcement for everyone to please take their seats. The main cabin door was slammed shut with a heavy pneumatic thud. The plane finally began to push back from the gate. The flight was 3.5 hours long. It was for everyone in that cabin the longest flight of their lives. Carolyn Vance did exactly as she was told. She sat rigid, facing the aisle. She did not drink. She did not use the restroom. She did not sleep. She was, as he had commanded, a ghost. El Gaija, with his father's presence, a wall of security behind him, finally put on his headphones and listened to his music. He drifted into a light, exhausted sleep. The only sound from row 22 was the quiet, frantic tap-tap-tap of Bill the accountant typing an email to his wife describing the entire unbelievable scene. The descent into O'Hare was tense. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed, and the cabin, which had been a tomb of silent resentment, stirred back to life. Elijah woke up, stretching. He felt the familiar pressure in his ears and the heavy, solid presence of his father in the row behind him. He felt safe. Carolyn Vance, on the other hand, looked like she had aged 10 years. Her expensive suit was rumpled. Her makeup was gone, scrubbed away by tears and stress. She looked broken. The plane landed with a hard, unforgiving jolt, skidding on the wet tarmac of a rainy Chicago night. As they taxied to the gate, the unwritten rules of deplaning began. People stood unbuckling. The ding of the seatbelt sign turning off was a starter pistol. "Elijah!" Marcus's voice came from behind. "Stay seated. Let them go." Elijah nodded, sinking back into his seat. Carolyn, however, was a compressed spring. The moment the plane stopped, she was in the aisle, grabbing her bag, pushing her way forward. She was desperate. "Ma'am, please wait for the rows in front of you." Susan, the flight attendant, called out. But Carolyn was already gone, a cream-colored blur of desperation fleeing the scene of her humiliation. She didn't look back. She didn't apologize. She just ran. Elijah watched her go. "Dad, it's okay, son. Let her run." They were the last ones off the plane. Marcus Thorne walked down the jet bridge, with his arm around his son's shoulder, his other hand carrying Elijah's precious violin. "You handled that well, Dad," Elijah said quietly as the automatic doors slid open into the bright, chaotic terminal. "You handled it better, Elijah," Marcus replied, his voice full of a deep, rumbling pride. "You stayed composed. You were a gentleman even when she didn't deserve it. That's my son." She was awful," Elijah said, the hurt returning. "She was," Marcus agreed. "She's a woman in a lot of pain, I think. But that's no excuse. Pain doesn't give you a pass to inflict it on others. Remember that." He stopped kneeling to be eye to eye with his 16-year-old. "What she did, that was not about you. It was about her. Her fear, her prejudice, her own self-hatred. You are a thorn. You are brilliant. You are worthy. Do not ever let a small, scared person like that make you feel small. Understand?" Elijah nodded, a real smile touching his lips. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now," Marcus stood up, dusting off his slacks. "My conference isn't until tomorrow. Your audition is the day after. How about we go to the hotel, order the most expensive room service burger they have, and you can tell me about this concerto." "Deal," Elijah laughed. As they walked toward the baggage claim, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. It was a text from his office. Then a new email flagged urgent. His face, which had been open and paternal, shifted. It became the doctor's face again, clinical, focused. "Dad, Everything okay? Marcus was reading the email, his eyes scanning quickly. It's a new consult from the Vance Cardio Institute. Elijah froze. Vance, like her name. Marcus looked at the name on the email. She wasn't lying. Patient Richard Vance. Status critical. Awaiting consult with... Marcus stopped reading. He looked up, a strange, dark and complex expression on his face. Awaiting consult with who, Dad? Dr. Marcus Thorne looked at his son. With me. I'm the specialist. I'm her last hope. She's at Northwestern trying to get her husband transferred to my program. Elijah's jaw dropped. Dad, what does that mean? Marcus pocketed his phone. A cold, hard light had entered his eyes. It means, he said, his voice quiet, that her emergency is real, and she's on her way to the hospital to see a specialist, but she has no idea. It's me. He looked at his watch. The consultation. She said it was at 9 a.m. Tomorrow. No. Marcus said, his voice grim. Today. She must have meant her flight yesterday, the one that got cancelled and rerouted. Her 9 a.m. appointment was 2 hours ago. A new, sick realization dawned. She's late, Elijah whispered. She's late, Marcus confirmed, and she spent her entire flight being that. He hailed a cab. The world was about to tilt. Karma, it turned out, wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a missed appointment. It was a ticking clock. The ride to the hotel was silent. The joy of their reunion had been punctured by this new dark reality. They checked in, and the first thing Marcus did was get on the phone. Elijah watched his father pace their hotel suite, which overlooked the rainy Chicago skyline. "This is Dr. Thorne," Marcus said into the phone, his voice all business. "I'm calling about the Richard Vance transfer. Yes, I'm aware. I'm in Chicago now. I just landed. Yes, I've seen the charts. Echocardiogram is appalling. Ejection fraction is under 15%. Who's his attending?" He listened, his brow furrowed. "Dr. Miller Good. He's a good man. Put me through to his service." Elijah sat on the bed, his violin case at his feet. He was supposed to be practicing. He couldn't. "Alan?" Marcus's voice changed a note of respect. "Marcus Thorne." "Yes, it's been too long. I'm here for the conference, but they've pulled me into this Vance case. What's the status right now?" A long pause. Marcus's face went grim. "He's crashing. Is he on balloon, ECMO?" "I see." "And the wife?" Another pause. "Carolyn Vance?" "Yes. She was on my flight." "No, she doesn't know. She missed her 9 a.m. with you. She's had a difficult journey. Look, Alan, can you keep him stable for 1 more hour? I'm sending my son to his audition prep. No, I'll do it. I'll drop him and come straight to Northwestern. I want to see the films before we make a decision. If we're going to do this, it has to be tonight." He hung up. He looked at his son. "Change of plans, Eli. Grab your coat." "What's wrong? Mr. Vance is dying. Actively. He's in cardiogenic shock. The team at Northwestern has done all they can. He needs a VAD, a ventricular assist device, as a bridge to a transplant. It's a high-risk experimental surgery. It's what I do." You're going to help him?" Elijah asked, incredulous. "After what she has nothing to do with it," Marcus said, his voice sharp. "My patient is Richard Vance, not Carolyn Vance. He is a 58-year-old man whose heart is failing. He doesn't get to die because his wife is a racist." He grabbed his laptop bag. My oath, Elijah, is to the patient, not to their families, not to their personalities. To the patient. It's the only thing that separates us from, well, from people like her. But Dad, she poor, Marcus said, cutting him off, is about to have the worst night of her life. And she deserves it. My patient does not. Let's go. The cab ride to the conservatory was a blur. Marcus dropped Elijah at the door, gave him a hug that crushed his ribs and said, "I'll see you in the morning. Knock 'em dead. Play it from your soul." Then the cab was gone, speeding toward the hospital. Carolyn Vance was in hell. She had arrived at the Vance Cardio Institute, ironically named for a distant wealthy uncle, not her, at 11:30 a.m., over 2 hours late for her 9 a.m. meeting. She was met by a sympathetic but firm administrator. Mrs. Vance Dr. Miller had to begin his rounds, and the specialist, he was flying in. We couldn't reach you. We've been paging you. My phone, the flight, just... Where is he? Where is Dr. Thorne? She had demanded. Dr. Thorne is unavailable. He's not on site yet. And Mrs. Vance, your husband's condition, he's not stable. Dr. Miller is with him now. For the next 4 hours, Carolyn sat in a sterile beige waiting room. The smell of bleach and stale coffee replaced the lavender sanitizer. She called Richard's phone, got no answer. She called her home, her club, her friends. She was alone. The power she wielded in her world was useless here. Her St. John suit was a joke. Her jewelry was brass. At 4:00 p.m., a young resident, his face etched with exhaustion, came out. Mrs. Vance. Yes, finally, what's happening? Where is Dr. Thorne? I was told he was the only one. Mrs. Vance, your husband is in critical condition. He's in respiratory distress. We're moving him to the CVICU. Dr. Miller has... Frankly, he's done a miracle keeping him with us. But he's failing, Mrs. Vance. We need Dr. Thorne. We've been trying to reach him. He's the only surgeon in the country who will attempt this VAD implant on a patient this high risk. So get him, Carolyn shrieked, the raw panic breaking through. What are you waiting for? I don't care what it costs. Get him. He's on his way, the resident said. He just landed. The resident's pager went off. Excuse me, they're taking him up now. Carolyn was left alone again in the echoing, awful silence of the waiting room. The last hope was a phantom. The man who held her husband's life in his hands was somewhere. And she had missed him. She put her head in her hands, and for the first time, she wasn't crying for herself. She was crying for Richard. An hour later, the waiting room doors slid open. She looked up, expecting the young, tired resident. It was Dr. Miller, her husband's primary cardiologist. And beside him, Carolyn's heart stopped. Beside him stood the man from the plane, the VIP, Elijah's father. He was wearing blue surgical scrubs. A stethoscope was slung around his neck. His face was a mask of cold, hard professionalism. Carolyn Vance went white. She stood up, her legs shaking. "You," she whispered. "You're Dr. Marcus Thorne," he said. His voice was not the warm, paternal one he used with his son. It was the voice of God, cold, distant, and final. "Mrs. Vance, we should have met at 9 a.m. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her delay, her scene, her behavior. My flight, she stammered. It was delayed. I was... You were on flight 1109, he stated, from LAX. So was I. So was my son. The room was tilting. I didn't know. She whispered the words, sounding pathetic even to her. No. Dr. Thorne said, You didn't. You were busy. He took a step forward. Dr. Miller faded into the background, a silent witness. Your husband Richard is dying. Marcus said, no trace of sympathy in his voice. It was a fact, a diagnosis. His heart is a wet paper bag. He has perhaps hours. The surgery was scheduled to perform is an experimental last-ditch effort. It has a 40% mortality rate on the table. For stable patients, your husband is not stable. Please! She begged, tears streaming down her face. She was not the woman from the plane. She was a shell. Please, you have to. You're the last hope. I am, Marcus agreed. And you? You spent 3 hours this morning on a crowded plane, terrorizing my 16-year-old child. He let the words hang. He let her feel the weight of them. You called him diseased. Marcus's voice was a whisper, but it cut her to the bone. You called him unsanitary. You refused to sit next to him. You made my son, who is flying across the country to audition for a music conservatory, feel like less, like dirt. I'm sorry, she sob-bed, a raw, guttural sound. I'm sorry, I'm not. I was stressed. My husband, I wasn't thinking. No. Marcus said, his voice flat. You were. That's the problem. You were thinking exactly what you are. That was you, Mrs. Vance. Stripped of your privilege in a stressful situation. That was your core. He looked at her, and she saw no mercy. Please, don't let him die, she whispered, collapsing into a chair. Please, I'm begging you. Isn't there an oath? Doctor, Marcus Thorne looked at the woman who had just hours before held his child's dignity in her hands and crushed it for sport. He had her. He had her life, her husband's life, her entire world in the palm of his hand. And now he had to make a choice. Dr. Thorne stood for a long, silent moment, watching Carolyn Vance disintegrate. The woman who had, with such casual cruelty, built a wall of prejudice around his son, was now a pile of rubble at his feet. She was begging, not for her life, but for her husband's. The oath, he said, finally. His voice echoing in the small, cold room, is not for you. He turned to Dr. Miller. Prep him. I want him on bypass in 20. I'll scrub in. Page the ECMO team. I want them on standby. And get me his latest blood gas. I want to see the lactate. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it now. Dr. Miller, his face a mask of relief, nodded. Doctor. He hurried away. Carolyn looked up, her face a mess of confusion. What? I am going to attempt to save your husband's life, Mrs. Vance, Marcus said, turning back to her. His voice was ice. Not for you. Not because you're sorry. You're only sorry because you got caught. You're sorry because the man you insulted is the man you need. He leaned in, and his voice was so quiet she had to strain to hear it. I am doing this because a 58-year-old man in a bed upstairs is my patient, and my oath to him is sacred. It is sacred. He straightened up. You, however, he said, will sit here. You will wait, and you will think. You will think about your actions. You will think about what unsanitary means. You will think about what it means to be safe. And you will pray. You will pray to whatever God you have that my hands are as steady as my son's character. He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked with purpose through the double doors leading to the CVICU, leaving Carolyn Vance alone in the beige purgatory she had created for herself. The next 8 hours were the longest of her life. She sat. She thought. She cried. She paced. Every time the doors opened, she jumped, but it was just a nurse, a resident, an orderly. She saw a janitor mopping the floor, a young, dark-skinned man about Elijah's age. He smiled at her politely. Carolyn burst into fresh tears and couldn't look him in the eye. She thought about the smell, the chemical lavender smell of her sanitizer. She thought about the mask. She thought about Elijah's face, the look of profound, soul-deep humiliation. She thought about her husband, Richard, a good man, a man who gave to charity, a man who would be mortified. At 3:17 a.m., the double doors opened. Dr. Marcus Thorne walked out. He had taken off his surgical mask. His face was slick with sweat. He looked not tired, but ancient. He looked like a man who had been to war. Carolyn scrambled to her feet. Marcus looked at her. He just looked. He's alive, Marcus said, his voice flat. The VAD is in. His new baseline is stable. He's not out of the woods. Not by a long shot. He's on the transplant list. But he's alive. He'll see the morning. Carolyn collapsed her legs, giving way. She sobbed a sound of such raw, primal relief that it seemed to shake the walls. Thank you. She wept, grabbing at his scrubs. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh God, thank you. Marcus gently but firmly removed her hand from his arm. Don't thank me, he said. Thank Dr. Miller. Thank the CVICU team. Thank the perfusionist who ran the bypass machine. He paused, then added, his voice soft. And thank my son, Elijah. Carolyn looked up, confused. What? When I was in there, Marcus said, his voice raw with exhaustion. 8 hours, his heart in my hand. I wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking about him. I was thinking about his audition, about his poise, his grace. He had every right to curse you, to fight you, to make a scene. But he didn't. He sat there and he took it, with a dignity that you will never, ever possess. He pushed his surgical cap back, rubbing his forehead. Your husband is alive, because my son taught me what grace under pressure really looks like. I held on to that. That's what got him through. He turned to leave. Wait, Carolyn called, scrambling to her feet. Please, how can I? Marcus stopped, his back to her. You can't, not to me. To him, then, she said, desperate. Elijah, I need to apologize to him. I'll give him anything. Money for his college. A new violin. Anything. Dr. Marcus Thorne turned around, and for the first time he smiled. It was a cold, sad, terrible smile. You still don't get it, do you? He said. You think this can be bought. You think you can write a check and wipe the slate. He shook his head. My son doesn't need your money. He has a father. He has a future. He's going to be just fine. He started to walk away again. Then what? She cried, her voice echoing in the empty hall. What do I do? Marcus stopped at the elevator. He pressed the down button. He looked at her, his assessment finally mercifully over. You, he said as the elevator doors chimed, will do. Better. From now on, you will just be better. The doors opened. He stepped in. Wait, she whispered. Will I see you again? Dr. Thorne looked at her. I'll be doing rounds on your husband tomorrow, at 7 a.m. But, no, Mrs. Vance, I don't think you'll ever see me again. The doors slid shut, leaving her alone in the hallway, with the smell of bleach, the sound of her own ragged breathing, and the crushing, terrible weight of Grace. Elijah Thorne nailed his audition. He played the Mendelssohn with a fire and a passion he didn't know he possessed. He got the scholarship. Carolyn Vance sat by her husband's bedside for 3 months. When he was finally stable, they flew home. She was, by all accounts, a changed woman. Quieter. More humble. She sold her St. John suits. She started a foundation. But the apology she could never, ever make. She had been saved, but she would never be forgiven. And that was the real karma. And that's how Carolyn Vance learned her lesson. Not from a social media post, not from being cancelled, but from the cold, professional silence of a hospital waiting room. Dr. Marcus Thorne saved her husband's life, not for her, but in spite of her. He upheld his oath while she was left to confront the failure of her own character. Elijah got his scholarship, and Carolyn, she got a second chance at humility. A story that proves karma isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, terrifying skill of the very person you tried to erase. What do you think was Dr. Thorne's karma the perfect response? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share this story if it made you think, and subscribe for more real-life karma stories that will have you believing in justice.